I think there is an enormous spiritual chasm between the right and the left in this country that's only growing.
Let's start with crypto and Bitcoin before we zoom all the way out to spiritual warfare.
What, in your view, Nick, explains the complete, total, and kind of sudden embrace of crypto by the Republicans specifically?
I think one thing that mollified the concerns of some of the Republicans is the dawning realization that crypto is actually good for the dollar. It's not hostile to the dollar. We're not seeking to undermine the dollar, although many Bitcoiners say this.
Hey, a quick note before we get into today's episode with Nic Carter. Between the time we recorded and are releasing this podcast, an interesting and highly relevant conversation between Joe Rogan and venture capitalist Marc Andreessen took place on the topic of debanking. Let us play a clip real quick of that right now.
This thing called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, CFPB, which was it's sort of Elizabeth Warren's personal agency that she gets to control. And it's an independent agency that just gets to run and do whatever it wants, right? And if you read the Constitution, like there is no such thing as an independent agency, and yet there it is.
What does her agency do?
Whatever she wants.
What does it do, though?
Basically, terrorize financial institutions, prevent fintech, prevent new competition, new startups that want to compete with the big banks.
Really?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
How so?
Just by terrorizing anybody who tries to do anything new in financial services. And
Can you give me an example?
Well, I can say, debanking. This is where a lot of the debanking comes from, is these agencies. So debanking is when you as either a person or your company are literally kicked out of the banking system.
Andreessen received pushback from critics who said that he's exactly wrong because the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau protects people from debanking, including this post, which I'll link from previous Just Asking Questions guest Li Fong, pointing out that CFPB has protected or tried to protect Christian conservatives from debanking. As it happens, both Nic Carter and I have created relevant material on this topic. I made a short documentary in 2015 about Operation Chokepoint, which I'll link on screen and in the description. In short, the government decided that disfavored but not illegal industries like payday lenders, firearms dealers, and strip clubs should receive extra scrutiny, and the result was them being cut off from the banking system. I obtained a recording between a hookah shop owner and a payment processor confirming that pressure from the CFPB and Operation Chokepoint were the reasons they were cutting him off.
I thought it was a mistake because I had been with Bank of America since 2002.
Banks can terminate a customer's account at any time, and they have no legal obligation to provide a reason. So it can be difficult sometimes to connect the dots back to a federal policy like Operation Chokepoint. But Appel got confirmation after recording a phone call with a payment processor who shut down a large transaction he was trying to complete with a customer.
The nature of what we do in payment processing, at least with our processing bank, has become so more regimented and strict and focused on compliance and certain efforts in Washington. And have you heard of a little thing, called Chokepoint, in the CFPB?
Pretty much flat out told me Operation Chokepoint is the reason why my ACH account was closed, even though we had processing since 2005 and we had a clean record and had done good amount of business.
But that was then. What's going on now? Nic Carter in recent years has advanced his theory of Operation Chokepoint 2.0, which he argues is an informal but nonetheless coordinated effort spearheaded by the FDIC to cut off the crypto industry from the banking system. We discuss that in detail in this conversation. But here I wanted to excerpt a post I'll link that Carter made in response to the controversy over Andreessen's claim. He writes, the CFPB did, in an August court filing, describe the debanking of Christians as a discriminatory practice which the agency has statutory authority to tackle. We have yet to see the CFPB stick up for a non-protected class, such as conservatives generally, or an industry like crypto that has suffered debanking. Carter then lists the many examples of the crypto industry being debanked, as well as conservatives, including Melania Trump, allegedly getting cut off. His conclusion: the CFPB definitely makes it a habit to harass fintechs and banks and probably doesn't need to exist. Based on what we know about Chokepoint 2.0, though, they don't hold primary culpability. More directly involved are the FDIC, the OCC, the Fed, with coordination from the Biden White House. Overall, though, Mark is right and the critics are wrong. The CFPB is not yet some potent anti-debanking force. Debanking is real. It unequivocally applies to crypto and fintech, and more evidence of it will come out as Republicans take control and the inquiries are launched. So I agree with Carter's assessment here for the most part, and I'm glad that Andreessen had brought the issue to the fore. One last thing while we're on the topic of finance, let me quickly mention that Reason is in the midst of its annual webathon. This show, as well as the other work that Liz and I do for Reason, like the documentary you just saw a clip from, is underwritten by donors like you. So if you like what we do, please follow the links and chip in and mention our show when you do. Now let's dive a bit deeper into crypto, Bitcoin, Operation Chokepoint 2.0, and what the election of Donald Trump means for all of it with Nic Carter. Was Bitcoin the winner of the 2024 election? Just asking questions. I'm Zach Weissmuller, senior producer for Reason, joined by my co-host, Liz Wolfe, Reason associate editor and author of the Reason Roundup. Hey, Liz.
Hey, Zach.
So Donald Trump campaigned on a promise to protect Bitcoin and the entire crypto economy. Let's watch and remember that pledge.
I will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the USA, not driven overseas. I will support the right to self-custody to the nation's 50 million crypto holders. I say this with your vote. I will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin. And I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. I will also.
There you go. That was at the Libertarian National Convention, and major endorsements from the industry followed, including from the Winklevoss twins, who each made a $1 million Bitcoin donation to a pro-Trump PAC. Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong called Trump's win the dawn of a new crypto era. Bitcoin has hit new all-time highs since the election. Today's guest has been writing and speaking on these topics for a long time and was also celebrating post-election, going so far as to call Trump's win a victory in a spiritual war. Nic Carter is a writer and general partner at Castle Island Ventures, which invests in crypto financial infrastructure. He's also a cage fighter, apparently. Nic, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Zach. Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with crypto and Bitcoin before we zoom all the way out to spiritual warfare. What are you most optimistic about in terms of Trump 2.0 making America a better place for people to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin and other crypto assets?
I mean, the election was a completely binary event for those of us in the crypto industry. On the one hand, we were looking at total scorched earth under a Harris administration. I think the crypto industry in the U.S. would have been over. We were looking at offshoring the fund. We'd already seen this flight of capital overseas. We'd seen all these DeFi startups and stablecoins leave. We felt that crypto would be done and dusted in the U.S. under Harris. And then it's the complete opposite under Trump. He's made very specific commitments to the industry to allow it to thrive and to take the boot off the neck. So it couldn't have been more distinct in terms of the two outcomes. So it was a terrifying week. And, luckily we got the outcome we wanted. So yeah, happy to dive into all the specifics, but it couldn't have been more significant for the industry.
Yeah, on the Harris point, what was it that she was saying that was making you so skittish or, concerned to the point that you were going to start offshoring your fund?
I mean, I think she just represented a continuation of the Biden admin and their policies on crypto, which were extremely punitive, extremely harsh, whether it's from the SEC's perspective, suing every major crypto firm in the US, or doing this coordinated crackdown on banking to discourage banks from dealing with the crypto space, which we called Operation Chokepoint 2.0. Nothing she said indicated any desire to change course. They made a few stray comments about crypto here and there, but there was really no determination to change course. So she was, and in my opinion, she was to the left of Biden. Who knows what she really believed? She wasn't very clear about it. But the progressives typically don't like crypto, with some exceptions, and so I don't think she would have been at all favorable to the industry.
Famous last words. Who knows what she believed? I think that kind of sums up the entire campaign. We saw Trump appear at the Bitcoin conference, and then this year and the year before, when Zach and I were in attendance at the Miami Bitcoin conference, we saw RFK Jr. and Vivek Ramaswamy grace the stage. Technically speaking, RFK isn't of their same party, but like we can all sort of call this effectively one party and one side. What, in your view, Nick, explains the complete, total, and kind of sudden embrace of crypto by the Republicans specifically?
I think the smarter folks on the Republican side were pro crypto. Trump was an exception. He was skeptic. He was a skeptic before, but the likes of JD Vance and Vivek have been pretty favorable to crypto for a long time. Certainly, RFK Jr. has been. I think one thing that mollified the concerns of some of the NatSec focused Republicans is the dawning realization that crypto is actually good for the dollar. It's not hostile to the dollar. We're not seeking to undermine the dollar, although many Bitcoiners say this, but the rest of us in the crypto space are more sanguine about it and understand and increasingly promote the idea that crypto is great for dollar dominance via the stablecoin space, and that it promotes our national interests, and it doesn't in any way, undermine our monetary sovereignty. I think that is something that the Republicans have woken up to. And then, there's a huge crypto voter block out there, and there's a big quantum of capital that can be unlocked by, being favorable to the crypto space. And from a pragmatic perspective, I think the Republicans realized this. They saw it as a wedge issue that the Democrats are very bad on, and they could unlock the crypto vote. And I think they did that in this election.
How is this affected by Trump's shitcoin existing? Like, does this undermine the idea of his commitment to Bitcoin and to crypto? Like, does this complicate that narrative, or is this a good thing?
Yeah, the World Liberty Financial. Yeah,
Yeah.
Actually, we
yeah.
have he promoted that like less than a month before the election. We've got a clip of Trump, trying to pump the World Liberty Financial coin. Let's just play that to refresh our memories as to kind of how crazy the lead up to the election was. Could you play that, John?
News, the World Liberty Financial token sale is now live. Crypto is the future. Let's embrace this incredible technology and lead the world in digital economy. Go to worldlibertyfinancial.com.
He has incredible like QVC potential, right? Like, what do you think, Nick?
I mean, I like to joke that Trump is more of a degen than most of us in the industry, right? I was shocked by this. I got in trouble with the Trump organization because I was very publicly against World Liberty Financial. I thought it was a big exposure for him. I thought it opened him up to SEC harassment. I thought it would create this optics risk. I thought North Korea would hack it probably if they deployed it. They probably still will, frankly. And I thought that would look bad for him and reduce his electoral chances. And so I was very much against him doing that. So that's the kind of the one black mark on the crypto resume, as far as I'm concerned, is that he attached his name to this very meritless project. So that was unfortunate.
You
I mean, many such
mentioned,
cases, right, in crypto world.
yeah, really. Yeah, for real. You mentioned at the top there that you were worried that the Harris administration was going to continue this policy that you called Operation Chokepoint 2.0, which that's that's a phrase you coined to describe a pattern of choking off crypto from the traditional financial system. Of course, the first Operation Chokepoint was an actual formalized program of trying to cut off disfavored industries, whether it's kind of the sex trade or gambling or medical marijuana and so forth, from the banking system. Operation Chokepoint 2.0, as you describe it, was kind of a less formalized effort to do the same to crypto, choking them off from access to the financial system. And a month before the election, you revisited that in an article I'm going to pull up here for CoinDesk, why you should still care about Silvergate. And Silvergate was one of the banks that went down after the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. And you write here that the conventional narrative is that Silvergate, Signature, and others were architects of their own demise. They accepted crypto firms as clients and paid the price when the crypto space experienced tremors in 2022 and 2023. But you hold a different view. In your opinion, we have evidence enough to suggest that the two most important crypto banks, Silvergate and Signature, were opportunistically executed amid the fog of war during the 2023 banking crisis as part of a broader coordinated attempt to debank the crypto industry. Why should we tell us why you consider this a summary execution and why it still matters now that Biden is on his way out?
Yeah, I mean, pragmatically speaking, OCP 2.0 will end once we get new FDIC and OCC chairs. Actually, as we speak, House Financial Services is holding a hearing. Gruenberg, the chair of the FDIC, is testifying. Operation Chokepoint 2.0 came up in that hearing. It's a, kind of an existential issue, the crypto space. If you can't get banking, you can't do anything. Every one of our startups has problems with banking. In my view, it's unconstitutional to deprive a legal industry of banking. So this will change. Trump ended it, the first Operation Chokepoint, when he came into office. That was targeting a different industry, several industries. He will end, in my estimate, 2.0 as well. But I think it's a huge scandal. And if you look at Silvergate, the reason that they voluntarily liquidated, which is unusual, you almost never see it happen. Their business was almost exclusively providing fiat banking to crypto firms. And in 23, after FTX collapse, we know this now. The regulators went to them and said, you can only do 15% of your deposits pertaining to crypto. They wouldn't put this in writing, by the way. They would only verbally message it because they were afraid of leaving a paper trail, which was how Operation Chokepoint 1.0 was undone. So they learned, the regulators learned. And Silvergate management looked at the bank. They were still solvent. Even if they had a 70% drawdown in deposits, they were still solvent. And they decided to liquidate because they didn't have a business anymore, because the government deprived them of their core business, which was banking crypto. So in my view, that is kind of like a form of eminent domain. I think ultimately the truth will come out about that. With Signature, it's perhaps even more sinister. I mean, they appeared to be solvent as well throughout the bank run in early 23. And then on a Sunday night, they were sent into receivership by New York Department of Financial Services, and their assets were liquidated. They were sold off, and their crypto business was expunged. The crypto business was not sold on to the acquirer, Flagstar Bank. In both of those cases, I believe it was an execution. I've been pushing hard, to get to the bottom of it. And I know for sure we will get an investigation into it come January. And so the final set of facts will come out eventually. But I mean, I think it's a huge scandal because you're talking about serious, real banks being vanished, being disappeared by the government.
How do you make normal people care about this, right? Like eminent domain, but in the crypto space isn't exactly a sexy thing if you're a normal American who doesn't give a shit about crypto, right? Like what's the upshot? Like what's the tagline here to get people to actually care about this?
I think it's banking should be treated as a utility, not as a political plaything, right? I'm not normal, so I care a lot about it. But if it's not crypto, it could be you. It could be the Republicans could turn around and do it to the Democrats if they wanted. I don't think they will, but it could be whatever politically disfavored industry. We're going to target you through the banking, and it's very sinister. It's covert, and if the Republicans wanted, they could use this infrastructure that the left created to politicize banking. They could go after the abortion clinics. They go after Planned Parenthood. They could go after the universities. They could go after the NGOs. Any leftist cause they don't like, they could do the same thing. So if they do that, I'm going to be just as against it. I don't think banking should be politicized, whether it's the firearms industry, the adult industry, crypto, or anything else. So I think we should see it as kind of a net neutrality kind of reprise. Your electricity shouldn't be politicized. Your access to water shouldn't be politicized, nor should your access to banking. It should be a public utility.
Yeah, I've been really radicalized on this, and I think it's in part because of some of the OCP writing that you've done, Nick, where it's just like shocking to consider, especially like vice industries, whether it's the gun industry or the weed industry or strip clubs and sex work businesses, where it's just like, regardless of which specific thing you're looking to enjoy, it's really kind of astonishing that there are all of these very covert, very surreptitious ways that the government can attempt to put its thumb on the scale and deprive you of access to these things, which in many cases you just have a legal right to possess or to consume.
And here's the worst part is banking is a controlled industry. You can't just create a new bank. There's virtually no new banking charters granted. So I would almost accept the status quo if you could say as an entrepreneur, there's a market gap because the government has told the existing banks don't deal with this industry. Fine. I would start the new bank and I would serve this disfavored industry, but you're not allowed to. And when people come in like Caitlin Long with Custodia and say, I'm going to create the bank for crypto, they're not granted the master account at the Federal Reserve. They're not allowed the new charter. So the market can't clear. It's not a free market. It's a government controlled market. Banks exist at the pleasure of the government. They're highly regulated. And because of that, there should be some kind of constitutional or rule in place or some kind of law that says the government can make these insinuations to redline the whole industry.
So I mean, the first time around with the first Operation Chokepoint, that was executed by the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, Elizabeth Warren's brainchild. It seems like the villain here, as in your telling, is the FDIC. What? Why is that? And like, do you have any speculation as to what the motives are of the people involved with the FDIC?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I think the FDIC had a hand in the first choke point too. And interesting, it was the same chair as Marty Gruenberg, who, by the way, is going to resign now in January because he's mired in this misconduct investigation. So, under the first choke point, we know the Obama DOJ said we're going to go after payday lenders, and we're going to do it through these agencies. In the second one, we don't yet have that memo. We don't have the tell-all memo that says we're going to go after crypto. But it was a constellation of agencies. It was the Fed as well. It was the regional Feds. It was the FDIC. I believe it was championed ultimately by Warren appointees in the White House, specifically Bharat Ramamurthy, I think, was at the epicenter of this, who's a former Warren staffer. He was the National Economic Council in the Biden White House. So I do believe there was coordination, but it could have been a spontaneous thing as well. It could have been opportunistically after FTX, all of these federal regulators got together and maybe individually, they decided, well, it's time to kill crypto. We can't let crypto affect the banking system. We have to wall it off. We have to reduce the exposure to the banking system. Crypto is too risky. So it could well have been a spontaneous thing. I think it was coordinated, but we don't have all the facts yet.
So now there's a new sheriff in town, Sheriff Trump, and it looks like one of his deputies might be this gentleman. Let's bring him to the stage. Representative French Hill, who says that he is planning to investigate Operation Chokepoint 2.0 if as financial services chair. This is what he wrote in his press release. He said he would reverse the weaponization of government as demonstrated by Operation Chokepoint. This political targeting has continued under the Biden-Harris administration to go after industries like firearms and digital assets. Congress should fully investigate the conduct of the agency personnel to find if their actions and policies were consistent with applicable laws, regulations, and policy, while the Trump administration should officially halt and reverse this policy. What will that kind of approach do for Bitcoin and crypto in America if it does come to pass?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one criticism I have of McHenry, who previously chaired Financial Committee, it's that he wasn't tough enough on choke point. And so I actually had the chance to meet French Hill in Washington last week. And he told me if he was elected, or appointed to run the Financial Services Committee in the House, he would knock down doors to get to the bottom of this. So I'm really hoping he gets that appointment, because I believe that we deserve the facts. I think these agencies acted lawlessly, and so it's time for some accountability, in my opinion. The effect on the digital assets industry would be tremendous. Right now, banks are not allowed to touch crypto assets thanks to this very bad rule from the SEC called SAB 121, which means they have to treat the assets that they're custodying on behalf of the third party like an asset on their balance sheet. It doesn't make any sense. Banks have been told by the Federal Reserve not to deal with stablecoins. Stablecoins are great for the dollar. They're good for everyone. They promote financial efficiency. They're truly democratizing finance in a non-contrived way, like in an actual way that democratize finance. U.S. banks are not allowed to touch them. That has to change. We have foreign banks touching dollar stablecoins. U.S. banks can't touch them. And then, of course, startups have a hard time getting access to banking, especially FBO accounts, transactional banking, right, in the U.S., because of this 15% depository threshold on crypto accounts that the FDIC has messaged to banks, which is still in place. By the way, it is still in place today as we speak. That will be lifted. All these things will change. The U.S. will once again be the epicenter of the crypto industry. Startups will be unshackled. They will be able to actually just focus on product and growth instead of worrying about bank redundancy. So, I mean, it couldn't be it's probably the number one most important consequence of Trump's election, in my view.
It's a very optimistic and hopeful reading of the situation. I think the markets are responding that way right now. I will note that you have expressed some concern about some of Trump's potential picks, including Kevin Warsh of the Hoover Institution or the private equity billionaire Mark Rowan for Treasury Secretary. What are some of the big concerns there?
Yeah, I mean, Rowan, he doesn't know anything about crypto. I actually got in trouble with his team for saying that yesterday. But
What did they do to you?
they just sent me a lot of messages saying that I'm wrong.
So now we're
Um,
gonna get in trouble too. Thanks, Nick.
yeah, transitively. Warsh he wrote some extremely concerning op-eds back in the day about being relatively hostile to stablecoins and supportive of the CBDC in the US, which, by the way, directly contradicts Trump's promise that you played in your video just now.
Okay.
I think a CBDC is anathema to freedom and liberty. We don't need it. We should leave it to the private sector. They have been flourishing with the stablecoin space. It's been working great. So I would be extremely concerned if he got Treasury. I would support Besant or Harry for that seat.
Could we back up for a second? And though Zach and I both have nightmares about CBDCs, could you explain to our audience what that is?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple flavors. There's the retail CBDC, whereby
But it's a
individual.
central bank digital currency, right? Like
Right,
explain
sorry.
On the most basic level for the uninitiated.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trapped in the jargon. So it basically involves giving either individuals or businesses access to the central bank directly, as opposed to the intermediated model whereby we use commercial banks and physical currency and various other forms of digital dollars. The idea would be to actually digitize central bank reserves and allow those to penetrate the broader economy. The trouble is that if the government has this power, let's say if cash disappears and private sector or commercial bank dollars disappear in favor of this central bank apparatus, now in theory the government has this panopticon-like ability to monitor and surveil and control financial flows in a way that they probably ought not to have. If you look at China's efforts with a CBDC, that's a very real concern that's being deployed. It's being put into effect. In the U.S., I don't think it comports with the Constitution at all. But central bankers really like the idea because it gives them a lot of control and the ability to pull all these monetary levers. And people that love surveillance, financial surveillance, really like the idea. But I think people that like freedom should not like the idea at all.
It almost sounds like an oversimplification, but, like, that kind of literally is what's at stake here. It's like, do you want easy financial surveillance by the government or do you not, right? And, like, a CBDC would give certain powers to the federal government that I don't think any of us want them to have. Um, Sort of on that note, Nick, I know you've been spending an awful lot of time in Washington lately. I
That's
like I like all of your coverage of your own visits in Washington. What can you tell us, about your meetings with people who will play a really big part in the next few years?
Well, I'm optimistic so far about the most of the choices Trump has made for the cabinet. We'll see if they all get confirmed. In Congress, I was mostly there to visit Congress, actually. Um, it looks like on the crypto front, there is bipartisan support for a stablecoin bill. So that would take the stablecoin sector, which is kind of operating offshore and through these regulatory structures that are not fit for purpose, and it would create an actual framework to issue a stablecoin, whether at the federally regulated or at the state level. So there appears to be support there.
Before we go further, can you briefly make the case, assuming our viewers don't know very much about stablecoins at all, for why stablecoins would be so valuable? Like, why are they important and what exactly are they?
Yeah, I mean, a stablecoin is just a representation of a dollar, hopefully backed by real assets, that circulates on a public blockchain. And the kind of the best analogy I would make would be like, what if Venmo could just be used worldwide, frictionlessly? Right now, Venmo I think only works in the U.S., right? So you can't actually send it to someone in the UK. And so because public blockchains, there's global, natively interoperable infrastructure that anybody can access, anybody on the planet. Now all of a sudden you have these digital dollars that are circulating that are usable in Turkey and Lebanon and Nigeria and Argentina. And this is actually something people just didn't have access to before. They don't have the ability to get dollar bank accounts otherwise. So it's a level of financial efficiency and financial access that has never before existed. So today there's about $180 billion worth of stable coins. This is pretty material. It's growing. About 30 million monthly active blockchain addresses will make a stablecoin transaction, and they settle $10 trillion a year, which is about the same as Visa. So in the space of just 5 years, it's gone from nothing to a very, oh, wow, you guys have the chart there with the nice
There it is.
watermarks on
Oh,
it, too.
yes. Wonderful watermark.
I had to put the watermark because I kept on getting plagiarized with this chart, so please forgive me.
So
So
blue line go up, blue line go way up. That's quite telling.
that's the
Your
takeaway, yeah.
yeah.
And look, it's not
It
apples to apples. The Visa people, they actually don't really like this comparison, but that's okay. Um,
I
the
feel like
point
this is
is,
your constant refrain. It's like, I got in trouble with this person. I got in trouble with this guy. I got in trouble with Visa.
we like
Is there
Visa.
is there
We like
anyone you're not in trouble with right now?
I don't know. We'll see. The point is, stablecoins are a meaningful tool for individuals and for businesses, and increasingly for financial institutions. Um, banks do not talk to each other well, right? They operate regionally. They don't interoperate. When you want to send funds from the US to Nigeria, you have to go through all these correspondent banks, and it gets very expensive every step. And that's why when you send an international bank wire, it could take a week. It can get lost. You have to use the SWIFT network. The whole thing is just the infrastructure is due for an overhaul. Stablecoins are that overhaul. And I think that in the future, all of fintech is going to be built on top of stablecoins. It's happening. The transition's happening. And I think it's just tremendously good for consumers worldwide, especially in inflationary countries where they just want dollars. They don't have the ability to get them.
Yeah. And you said that at the beginning that this is partially why you think that at least part of the US government has become more friendly towards crypto and Bitcoin is that the rise of stable coins basically makes it easier for other countries to adopt dollars. Is that kind of the bottom line as to why that's helpful for the US dollar?
Yeah, exactly. So right now, if you counted stablecoins as a sovereign, you pretended there was a nation of crypto. Um, the nation of crypto would be the 16th largest holder of U.S. Treasury securities of all the countries out there. So it's already big, and that's only just after a few years. And I think ultimately we have an interest in foreign nations or individuals buying our debt. Lord knows we issue a lot of debt. We need someone to buy it. Most of the big holders of U.S. debt, like China and Japan, are actually divesting. They're selling the debt. So as long as we intend to finance our government cheaply, we're going to need to continue to issue it. So we have an interest in promoting dollar dominance. If you look at stablecoins, it could be in any currency, but 99% of them are issued against the dollar, which is much higher than any other international global arrangement like foreign effects reserves or FX trading or international trade invoicing. Those are all in the kind of like 40 to 60% range dollarized. So there's this new sector all of a sudden that's 99% dollarized. It's growing like a weed. I think that's tremendously positive for the dollar. And it totally turns this narrative on its head, which is that crypto is undermining the dollar, which I heard in Congress a lot, by the way. I asked all these members, okay, talk to your colleagues. What is their main misgiving or apprehension regarding crypto? And they said, well, we've just heard that it's bad for the dollar and it's going to undermine the dollar. It's totally the opposite. Blockchains, if you look at all the transactions that happen on blockchains, 70% of the value moving through blockchains is stable coins, and 99% of the stable coins are dollars. So that means that blockchains overall are good for the dollar, not bad for the dollar.
So speaking of people who are mad at you, does this make Bitcoin maximalists mad at you that you are promoting a technology that sort of bolsters the dollar when really we should be heading towards the Bitcoin standard, right?
Yes, but they're wrong. So, they can be mad
Why?
and they can be wrong because at the end of the day, Bitcoin, while it's doing tremendously well, did not end up being this transactional instrument. It ended up being a savings device that people want to buy and they want to hold it and look at it and post about it on the internet, but they don't want to use it for transactions for a lot of reasons. Main one being that it's volatile. It's not a good medium for transactions. People prefer to use stablecoins for that, and that's okay. It doesn't undo the Bitcoin value proposition. Bitcoin is okay being this like monetary gold-like instrument. It doesn't need to become the medium of exchange, in my opinion. It's very clear that it's stablecoins that are actually doing that.
I want to shift the conversation a little bit and take us to something. We're recording this on November 20th, but I want to take us to something that happened last week, which is that a 26-year-old founder of the election betting site Polymarket had his apartment raided. Shane Copland lives in Soho, and a whole shit ton of FBI agents stormed into his apartment and seized his electronics. And he has basically claimed, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. This is totally political retribution because Polymarket, the election betting site, a betting site overall, but that specializes in an awful lot of political election betting, ended up ultimately, accurately predicting the election. And he's claiming that basically they're going after him now and that he's pretty persecuted here and that this space in general is really going to be cracked down on in the future. Nick, what did you make of this whole saga and what do you make of the claim that it is political retribution?
Yeah, I think without a doubt it is. For some reason, Polymarket, I don't even think Shane is like particularly pro-Trump or anything, but Polymarket ended up being seen as this like instrument that Elon and Trump were utilizing in this sinister bid to manipulate the election. And I mean, look, it's just a market. The market says what the market is going to say. And in this case, it was thoroughly vindicated. Polymarket vastly outperformed the polls, both on a forward-looking predictive basis for the ultimate winner. It was consistently more bullish on Trump's chances. And on a latency basis, Polymarket called all these tight elections in the swing states hours before the polls were able to, or the pundits. And so it represents this shift in our sort of like epistemic model around elections is we have these efficient markets which can tell us which way things are going to go long before the pundits can aggregate the data. And I think part of maybe the belly aching around Polymarket reflects the fact that there is this new sheriff in town, which are these prediction markets, not just Polymarket. But yeah, I think it's completely unreasonable that the FBI would raid Shane's house like this. That's ridiculous. They could probably have just asked his lawyer for whatever documents they needed. And yeah, I think they were trying to intimidate a young 26-year-old tech founder. Uh, I suppose their issue is probably U.S. individuals using VPNs to use Polymarket. It's not meant to be used in the U.S. But still, I think there's more civilized ways they could have gone about asking him those questions.
Obviously, the charges haven't been announced yet if they are in fact charging him with anything. But one of the things that really bothers me about this type of thing is that it's really not clear to me that anybody was defrauded here. It's not clear to me that anybody was harmed. What is clear to me is that a whole bunch of people decided to use their own money and to place bets on the outcome of the election. And some people won big and other people lost. And it's not clear to me that there was anything going on other than a whole bunch of consenting adults deciding to put their money, behind their mouths, right? And like to me, it's just hard to see who exactly loses out on that. That's just something that we ought to be totally able to do, and it's unclear to me where this narrative really emerged that Copland or anybody was attempting to sway the election. I mean, it's do you have any sense of like why they would believe this?
Yeah, I think it's preposterous. I was very vocal about it. I suppose it's because Trump was consistently outperforming on Polymarket and, frankly, other on Predictit and Kalshi too on the other election
Why wasn't
markets.
Kalshi gone after? Like, that's one of the things that's confusing to me about this.
Yeah, I mean, people have all these conspiracies about, Founders Fund invested in Polymarket and
Mm.
Peter Thiel and Elon and Trump. But because there was this big whale, the French whale, that bought all the Trump shares on Polymarket. But I think if you don't have experience in markets, then it's easy to spin conspiracies about manipulation. But if you are a trader, then you would just look at this and say, okay, well, if the whale is wrong, take the other side of the bet. You're getting better odds.
Yeah, and the reporting on that whale revealed that it's not as if he was some sort of Trump surrogate or something. He was basically a guy who was taking a contrarian approach. There's a way of polling where you can ask, uh, who do you think your neighbor is going to vote for? And he decided that that was showing a very strong signal for Trump. And in his mind, that indicated Trump was way underrated because people don't want to tell pollsters they're going to vote for Trump, but they will guess that their neighbor is going to vote for Trump. And so that's the kind of interesting thing about a prediction market is it can zig when the consensus is zagging and like really uncover something and give us a much clearer picture than any of the statistical modelers gave us that this was going to be a pretty decisive win for Trump. So we're like, it's kind of insane that we're regulating these markets in a way that is preventing that sort of knowledge from surfacing. I'm curious if you have any inkling or notion as to how that sort of regulation could be changed going forward under a Trump administration. If the charges do end up being, oh, people were using VPNs to get around the ban and somehow Polymarket is responsible for that, what's the way to make it so that Polymarket can just operate legally in the United States?
Yeah, it's been the CFTC, the commodities regulator. They have been consistently hostile to prediction markets for decades, which is baffling to me because prediction markets are one of the markets that have very positive externalities, which is that they create this informational signal, right? Which we clearly saw in the last election, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there's counterparties betting on things. They're trying to make money. But out of that arrangement, we get information, which is useful for us. We found out that Pennsylvania was going for Trump at 8 p.m. as opposed
Mhm.
to 3 a.m., right? So it's a market with a positive externality. So the fact that the CFTC hates it so much is crazy to me. They've consistently stifled the space. Kalshi had to win a lawsuit in order to be able to offer their markets in the US. Polymarket had to go offshore. So I would look to see who gets the next chairmanship of the CFTC. And I think if it's a pro crypto individual, forward thinking person, then I think the law will change and we'll get a full normalization of prediction markets.
Can we circle back to the super long post from the beginning where Nick talked about spiritual war and how the 2024 election is a spiritual war? What exactly is it that you meant by this?
Yeah, a lot of people messaged me after I wrote this and were like, "Have you completely lost your marbles?"
Have you?
I don't know, maybe. Read the blog post. So I don't know. I think it's not very popular to post about being a Christian, or maybe it is now. Maybe now that Peter Thiel talks about it, it's cool now to be a Christian in the technology sector. Um, I personally feel, and others are fine to disagree with me on this, that there was an element of divine providence in Trump's ascension to the throne. I think God spared his life for a reason with the assassination attempt, and that was so he could regain the presidency. And then, so I feel that there was a sense of inevitability on the right, on the Christian right, about the Trump presidency. That there was a degree of divine providence, and then on the left, I also think that the left is in the thrall to some religious tendencies, which were exemplified by the Harris campaign. But these are like secular religions, like the religion of wokeism, which I think is like when you strip God out of life, you find alternative, deities to worship. So wokeism is one. The climate eschatology, there's doomerism about climate, doomerism around AI. I think these also have, they can be understood through a spiritual lens. And so I did see it as this clash, the clash of worldviews. It wasn't just about the policies, is what I'm saying. The election wasn't just about policy. It was actually about these two very competing visions for the country. On one, the Christian right; on the other side, the secular left, but a left that still, despite themselves, does engage in this what I consider idolatry, what they might consider, like very rational tendencies. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, but does it trouble you that or have you been able to ascertain the possible significance of the sort of, not savior figure, but the representative of the right being such a profoundly, a figure that's profoundly devoid of morals to like a very absurd degree? Like there's an absurdist element to it all, where it's like, okay, even if I'm like tracking with everything you're saying, it's still a very hard pill for me to swallow, the idea of Trump being this the leader of a movement that I think you're describing as one that is like right and moral and just from my worldview, but him being such a horrifying figure himself. What do you make of this?
Yeah, and look, I've had my personal engagements with the Trump camp, and he's certainly not a person I would ever do business with. That's for sure. So I totally see him as this like flawed, like martyr type figure. Certainly, like there is an element of martyrdom in Trump, right?
Mhm.
Every possible weapon that could have been used against him. I just spilled my Coke. Um, Diet Coke.
No, I
Shout
was
out.
gonna I was going
Oh,
to
good. Yeah. No high fructose corn syrup in
Of
your
course.
body.
Yeah. Sorry, my apologies to RFK Jr. I think there's an element of this. I think he's this flawed biblical figure. And if you look at the heroes of the Bible that God chose to do his bidding, many of them are flawed too. In fact, that's kind of this very, very common theme, specifically in the Old Testament. Look at Samson. Samson was chosen by God. He was granted this supernatural strength. And what did he do with it? I mean, he went visiting prostitutes, killing so many people, just wandering around, wreaking absolute havoc. But then he had this moment of redemption at the very end. And so I think a lot of within the Christian narrative, a lot of these individuals chosen by God to carry out his plans are actually very flawed. And I see Trump the same way. I mean, not a person I think I would personally like, not necessarily someone I want to spend time with or do business with. But he's been, visited by all of these like outrageous provocations, and he has suffered, and he's faced maybe the rest of his life in jail, bankruptcy, etc. Despite all that, he prevailed, and I think on net, his presidency will be good for the country. And a lot of people feel like this has been a spiritual shift, something changed, the vibes have changed, etc. So that's how I sort of reconcile the two things.
I'm not really sure exactly what to make of all that, but there's definitely been a sense on both sides, I would say, that it seems like each election is like more and more like that like more apocalyptic? Like we had Elon Musk literally saying this will be the last election ever if Trump loses. I don't know if you felt that way as well, but
100%.
you did.
100%.
Okay.
Wait, why?
Because I agree with Elon. I thought the left would engage in this demographic replacement, which they had begun under Biden. I think they would have intensified it and turn the whole nation into California, bring in enough folks that would be, you know, Democrat voters, find schemes through which naturalize them and make them citizens and turn the country into like a permanent like leftist Argentina model.
Are
Would they
you
even be able to accomplish that over the course of like 4 years though? Like, wouldn't that require so much time? I mean, even thinking about like conceding that there's been this like drastic influx of illegal immigrants, and it's a Reason podcast, so we can't talk bad about them. It's totally acceptable. Just kidding. But no, I have an issue with the degree to which immigration at the southern border is so uncontrolled. Even though I'm a huge proponent of legal immigration, there's a certain amount of like, well, the people didn't really vote for this. And you have this massive asylum court case backlog, which I think presents a real issue. But even like conservatively estimating, we have like 11-ish, 12-ish million people currently in the country illegally out of a population of 330 million total. Conceding, okay, there could be gerrymandering at play. Like I'm sorry, like these numbers just don't track with attempted. Like you would have to be specifically, like very deliberately settling these illegal immigrants and very quickly naturalizing them in places where they will do like the maximum amount of good from the Democratic Party perspective in order for that to actually happen. Like, is this plausible at all?
I think that was the plan. I think that it was. I think that was literally the plan. Call me a conspiracist. Some of my conspiracies have been true. So I think the plan was to settle them in swing states where you only need a few 100,000 to swing. But I think it was undone because the legal immigrants, the Hispanic community, etc., actually resented this and swung for Trump this election. So I think this was the plan, and I think it was undone.
Yeah, that's where it sort of starts to crumble for me a little bit. The fact that that did happen, that there was this swing among Latinos towards Trump, does that, it sort of undermine the whole demographics or destiny narrative. Like, well, not really. But I guess is what you're saying that the plan here was to actually just mass naturalize millions of people so that, quote unquote unassimilated people are suddenly, filling the voter rolls.
Yeah, certainly. And
Yeah,
I don't think
no
I'm
problem.
even being a vastly, Alex Jones style conspiracist by saying that. I think the left was telling us that too.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
there
what
was.
I was going to ask is, now that Trump won, the Republicans control the Senate and the House, and the Supreme Court leans conservative. Do you think that sense that we're headed, that each election is more and more apocalyptic, is that going to recede or continue? Like, if you had to guess.
No, I think it'll be like that forever. And this
Wow.
is why I wrote that post. I think there is a enormous spiritual chasm between the right and the left in this country that's only growing. I mean, if you look at these polls, you see like men and women are 40 percentage points apart politically. I think both sides have this very existential view of politics. You have the U.S. descending into this banana republic approach where when one party gains power, they pursue recriminations and legal action against the prior party. It's just this never ending cycle because if, the former head of state goes to jail every time there's a transition of power, then the stakes are that much higher. So that's, I think, the world we're in now in the US. Maybe Trump will break the cycle. I'd be surprised if he did. I think he will probably, like the Matt Gaetz DOJ nomination, I think that's very pointed. So I think the lawfare that Biden visited on Trump and his affiliates, that will be now replicated by Trump and then by the next guy. So we're in this never-ending churn now.
Well, I mean, yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Well, I was just going to say, but okay, Trump has done all manner of things wrong legally, which he has in fact been convicted of. I mean, it's kind of wild. Like I don't know. So some of them I can understand taking great issue with some of the trumped up charges related to like the whole falsification of business records thing. I think is an interesting example because it's like okay, falsification of business records for hush money payments to a porn star. Okay, this is just like salacious on every level, but it's not totally clear to me that this is a heinous crime worth getting him for. But the fact of the matter, like, he was convicted of the 34 counts of this, and his sentencing date keeps getting pushed back. I think now it's possibly like it's a few months. It was supposed to be in November, right? And now it's been pushed back further. It's likely that he won't face any jail time over this at all whatsoever. I'm sorry, but if like they're trying, and this was one of the most successful and expeditious of the cases against him. I'm sorry, but like if this is the lawfare, it's not actually doing that much when Trump in fact gives his opponents so much to work with. And so like doesn't that throw cold water on the thesis that, the Trump haters are, throwing the whole book at him? I mean, the actual results of it are not as supposed to be bad. Like he's not behind bars. He is in fact ascending to the White House once again. Doesn't this mean that the whole like, yes, them going after him in this way at all is unacceptable, but the actual consequences have not been especially extreme, right?
Well, I think that the investigations or the cases, the sentencing ended because he won. I mean, but look at his
Well, the sentencing will
surrogates.
still
Look at
happen,
Steve
I
Bannon. Just Steve Bannon went to literal prison. I
yeah.
look at Alex Jones. Not that he's like necessarily a Trump guy, but he was stripped of everything he owns. Look at everyone that was in the Trump orbit. How many of them were prosecuted? Were they all criminals? I mean, I suppose you can say that, but to me, it looks like using the legal infrastructure in this country to go after the former members of the administration.
I mean, I even look at the degree to which, like, I mean, Trump was impeached but never removed from office, right? Like, I don't know. I kind of see it as a little bit more of this, like, seemingly like this weird cat and mouse game where he keeps like evading it in part because it's all just like there's such it's the political spectacle and the pageantry of it more than it is an actual will to ensure that he ends up behind bars. I guess I don't know enough about the Steve Bannon case to know the degree to which that was political persecution. And I also am sympathetic to the idea that, like, this is a crazy way of wasting people's time and money by forcing them to go through these proceedings in the first place. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know if the Democrats are gonna get him and they're going after him over and over again, like, boy, are they bad at it when he gives them so much to work with, which at least like complicates the narrative a little bit for me.
I think they lack the killer instinct. I think they wanted to go full, Uganda or name your banana republic, and but they couldn't quite bring themselves to do it. But
There,
maybe they've learned.
I mean, there's this question of when you're thinking about cycles of retribution, but then also trying to imagine what real accountability looks like. It's a sort of complicated balance. I mean, I noticed that you posted this wish list on Twitter of what you would like to see accomplished in Trump 2.0. I think I have it here.
There's
And at the top,
retribution as the first thing.
yeah, at the top of that list is a COVID Nuremberg. Most important, at a minimum, what was Fauci's role in gain of function research? Ideally, jail time for those responsible. This one cannot be overlooked. Um, and I'm saying this as somebody who agrees with you that we need to know exactly what Fauci's role was in funding gain of function research in Wuhan. Like that, there was clearly a lot of deception that went into the question of whether it was a lab leak or not. Sort of covering their tracks. That all, and I believe Rand Paul is going to be seeing up that investigation, which is a good thing. But like, what would you actually like to see? Like, what would be a satisfying outcome there for you that doesn't lurch into the Banana Republic status?
I mean, put it this way. Like, let's say, a Chinese plane happened to be flying over the U.S. and accidentally or maybe deliberately dropped a nuclear bomb that killed however many people COVID killed, right? We would want to get to the bottom of that. What if it turns out that the bomb was manufactured by us and that was concealed and covered up, right? We'd want to get to the bottom of that too. We'd want to find out who authorized it. Was there a cover up? Why did we ban people from social media from talking about it? We would want to explore military, potential military recriminations against China, maybe, if they did this knowingly or through negligence, right? None of this happened. This was a COVID analogy, by the way, in case it wasn't clear, right? None of this happened. China released a bioweapon, which I believe was manufactured in a lab, which I believe Fauci was involved in, had some knowledge or involvement in, And then there was a massive cover up, and we all suffered for years because we shut down the nation with these non-pharmaceutical interventions. We were all confined to our homes. I think this election was a referendum partly on COVID, and we've never gotten any kind of justice, no sort of reconciliation, no truth, just constant lies, cover-ups, a refusal to reckon with what happened. We haven't had anything in the way of catharsis or free sharing of information. So ideally, Fauci would be putting stocks in the town square, and we could throw rotten fruit at him. But just give me anything, for God's sakes. Anything at all. We can start there.
Zach, what
Yeah.
do you think should be done for the people who harmed us?
Well,
Like, what do you think
first
should
of
be done to them?
first I will say that it was a weird sort of indirect referendum on COVID because, of course, Trump was at the center of the COVID response, and he bears some responsibility for how this all went on. We had more sort of COVID purist candidates during the Republican primary who fell off and couldn't compete with Trump. But I do agree with you. Like there is a sense in which this is like the subtext of the election. Like there was just this frustration of whatever happened after 2020 between the pandemic and some of the protests and the messaging about how you should behave and not behave. I think people were fed up with that. And this election was in some ways a reaction to that because Trump is, if anything, a great middle finger. To Liz's question as to what should happen, I mean, I believe there should be an investigation that I think Rand Paul, as I mentioned, is a good person to be overseeing that. He's been pretty dogged. He was the first person to confront Fauci publicly in a public forum about this. And so the fact that Trump seems to be tapping him to be the guy to head that up, gives me confidence. And so far, I don't think there's a smoking gun in terms of there was some sort of criminal activity. I think there was a lot of obfuscation and, playing games with FOIA to keep things hidden as long as possible. But yeah, if that smoking gun emerges, then the legal process should absolutely play out.
I would love to see a political candidate just like bring the axe down on teachers unions, right? Like I will never get over the image of teachers unions members protesting in the streets, holding the tombstones and the coffins, basically trying to make the case to empathetic parents that if forced to return to the classroom to, I don't know, do their jobs of educating the children in a public school environment, that they will in fact drop dead. Um, and then people responding to that type of pressure and A, permitting schools to be closed for far longer than I think they otherwise would have been, and B, moving said teachers, who in many cases were 30, 40 years old, to the front of the vaccination line. But then, even after they were vaccinated, the teachers still couldn't possibly return to the classroom because that would still be an unnecessary risk to bear. And it's just like, okay, like, I'm sorry, these are complete and total clowns, and we have hundreds of thousands of them in this country. And forevermore, they'll just like still be in charge of educating the children. Like, where's the justice in that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Abolishing teachers unions might be a good start here. I mean, we're apparently abolishing the Department of Education is on the table, so we'll see if that goes
Yeah.
anywhere. I am curious, Nick, just back to your wish list for 1 second. I saw AI on there. Could you either talk a little bit about that or just any other item on your wish list as we bring this to a close? But beyond crypto and COVID accountability, like what are your hopes for Trump 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that he's more effective this time. I hope that he is not distracted by, never-ending scandals and impeachments and surrogates that are undermining him and rhinos, in the I think he has deliberately changed his, calculus in terms of his appointees to be loyalists. They may be incompetent, but loyalists, and I think that's on purpose. So I hope he can actually pursue his agenda. I don't think he was effective at all in the first term. On the AI front, I mentioned it briefly before, but I think Silicon Valley has been seized by this disease of AI doomerism. I think a lot of folks at OpenAI and et cetera are self-aggrandizingly believe that they're summoning some kind of like godlike creature into existence when there's really no evidence of that, or like the AGI that could potentially kill us all or unleash a new era for prosperity, whichever one it is. I think that's a complete myth. It's a, Peter Thiel calls it the millenarian cult. It's a modern millenarian cult. It's an apocalyptic cult, right? And we're either going to be saved, we're going to merge with AI, we're going to have the singularity, or it's just going to kill us all. I think there's absolutely no evidence of that. I think they like to believe that they're the most important people in world history. And so I think that's why they proclaim it so loudly. And so then we get this doctrine of AI safety. We use the canard of the AI apocalypse to install this AI safety module, which appears to me to be, embedding leftist ideology into AI, which I don't think has anything to do with safety, frankly. I think it just has to do with control. And so it also benefits the biggest AI companies because they want to, raise the barrier to entry and install themselves as the 3 or 4 in the oligopoly and not let anybody compete. So, luckily, I think Trump's agenda, to the extent, or the Republicans and Trump have talked about it, it's more focused on unleashing AI innovation. I don't think we should be afraid of it. I think it can bring us into a new era of prosperity and really power GDP growth and power advancements in medicine and energy and like all sorts of industries. So that's my hope, is that we have this clear-eyed policy around AI and that we're not burdened by these kind of spurious notions of safety.
Yeah, the unshackling of AI. It's been interesting to see when again Elon Musk kind of putting himself at the center of this firestorm when he rolled out Grok, and then I remember the image generator when that launched. It was just you could just do anything, and people were freaking out, and because you go over to ChatGPT or whatever, and you tell it to, I think it uses Dolly for image generation, and it makes like very cartoonish, like gate kept versions of whatever you want. And I just typed in, Ben Franklin with a machine gun, and it just like made a perfect image of that. And so there's something to that idea of like, can we just like use these tools in the way that we want to? Can we have fun with them and use them in a productive way instead of the sort of most cautious people in the world, implementing their ideology as a layer on top of it that we have to somehow hack around? That's a more exciting future if that's a little more unfettered. I think I agree with you there. Liz, any final thoughts?
No, I just wanting to inject the OpenAI hate into my veins. I have some stories for off this podcast, Nick. We'll have to get together sometime and share them. I want to bring us to our final question of the podcast, which is, Nic Carter, what is one question that you think more people should be asking?
Oh my goodness. Okay, interesting. I wasn't prepared for this. What is one question more people should be asking? I mean, my mind immediately goes to COVID and the origins of COVID. That's maybe the question that I am like still fixated on, frankly. Like, what was Fauci's involvement truly? And until we get a satisfying answer to that, I'm not going to move on.
Yeah, well, let's hope that we do in the next couple of years. Nic Carter, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to put out a reminder to all of our viewers and listeners that we've just relaunched our new channel. So any help by subscribing, sharing with friends who would like the show would be huge for us right now. And we will see you all again next week. Thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you. This has been great.
Thanks for listening to Just Asking Questions. We drop a new episode every Thursday, so if you want to support the work we do, please like and share this episode, subscribe to our new YouTube channel, and follow the show on your favorite podcasting app. See you next time.